Good morning, everybody. Welcome to this interview by Core Recruitment. Thank you very much for joining us today. Now, I feel really privileged to be running this interview series because it's about a topic which is very close to my heart, which is all about diversity and inclusion, and specifically BAME entrepreneurs within the hospitality sector and looking at their journeys. This is all based around the adage that if you can't see it, then you can't be it. So we've got enlisted some amazing people who are going to be telling us a little bit about their stories, their experiences, and hopefully you take this as inspiration within your own career and your own journey, and a bit more understanding and communication about people as well. Now, Core Recruitment, we've been doing a lot of work on diversity and inclusion. We've been running a workshop series with Google's I Am Remarkable. We've run an LGBT group. We do a lot of social work. And one thing that kind of like always comes up is about terminology and getting the terminology right. And I get the terminology wrong all the time. Sometimes I make a point of getting the terminology wrong all the time as well. So it's just really important with these interviews that, like, if we get it wrong all the time, then it's okay for everybody else to get it wrong all the time as well. It's just about the narrative, and it's about trying to get out there, doing something positive, and not stumbling over your words all the time, as I do constantly. So thank you very much for watching today. And I'm going to introduce Geeta. Geeta, how are you?
I'm very good. Thank you for having me on.
Thank you very much for coming on. So if you could give us a little bit about yourself, about Nosh, and about your journey to date and your work, that would be fantastic.
Oh, that's I'll just encompass the last X number of decades. I'm the CEO and founder of Nosh Detox, and which is a company I set up in 2008. So I'm Indian. So of course, growing up, doctor, lawyer, accountant, marriage, or death were the options that I was given. I mean, and I say this, and everybody who is, Asian laughs because it's so true. So I went with law because I can't do numbers and I don't like blood. And it was something that I did. And then what happens is that, life comes and gets you when you're planning. And so my first child was very, very ill for about a year. And it changed my whole life, because it meant that for a year I couldn't go to work. For a year I couldn't I just was on this sort of corporate pathway, and it was stopped dead. And so I needed to find a way to be at home, because he's anaphylactic, so very allergic to things that he could touch and eat. And I needed to find a way to be at home to make sure he stayed alive, because he would get cardiorespiratory arrest, and it was just a horrible time. And so the thing that I did was I transitioned from being a corporate lawyer to being a corporate negotiator. Because then what people did would bring me in where there was a problem, and go, can you just go fix that? And I'd be like, sure, no clue what I was doing. But I was like, I can totally fix you so I can get my bills paid. Watch me fix this. It came from, I always say poverty is a great driver of ambition and many other things. And then I came from there, and I was like, I really want to build something. I want to have something that grows. And the thing I knew how to do by that stage was health, because my son was so ill and I'd worked really hard on his health. And then that's how I ended up with Nosh Detox. But becoming a health expert was really, really just not anywhere up on my list of things to do.
Wow. And I know we spoke a little bit about this off camera, but just regarding the situation with your son, I think people would be really interested to know what brought that about.
Oh, he was allergic to a protein in one of the injections that he was given, and he reacted to it, and he had a little patch of eczema after the first one. After the second one, it was like all over his face, and by the third one, it was literally all over his body. And so the only places you could kiss him would be here, on his hands, and on his soles of his feet, because there was nowhere else. And it would weep, and it was just terrible. And he would scratch himself all night. And then when the eczema went into remission, he would get asthma. So I was so young, and I just spent all my nights thinking, is it better that he scratches himself to bleeding every night, or is it better that he actually can't breathe and I watch him trying to struggle for his next breath every night? I cannot stress how appalling it was as a situation. And what things like that do, these kind of crises, is they actually just change your entire life, right? Because my marriage broke up, I lost my job, I couldn't do any of the things I was meant to do because it was over. And so I had to find another version of me to be that still paid the bills.
Absolutely. And your son is well now, and
Oh
he's
my
going to be a
gosh,
doctor or a lawyer?
he's 25. And he is built like a brick house and doing incredibly well, and really, really good, frankly.
The next question to come on to is maybe a little bit more about kind of like, how you came to the UK, what your background was kind of like prior to that, Geeta.
I say that they were trying to colonize me so thoroughly. I got colonized twice because I'm an Indian from Africa, and I grew up in Malawi. My father's from Punjab. My mother was born and brought up in Kenya, but again, I'm Punjabi Sikh. And we grew up on a farm in the middle of pretty well, I mean, I say in the middle of nowhere, and everybody goes, it wasn't the middle of nowhere. I'm like, there were two streets, okay, let's just not push this. And then we went to school in this country, right, because those are the passports that we have, and that's how we did it. And so I came out here on my 15th birthday without I mean, I think about that now, and that leaves me with more of a clench in my heart than even my son's illnesses, because we didn't know anyone, we didn't know anything, we didn't know how it worked, we spoke English, that was pretty much it. Had a great education because we had a British private school system kind of set up, and that was it. So everything that I have, everything that I do, everything is something that I made. I mean, made. Wow. With my own hands. It's really, I look at my kids sometimes and I laugh because I was like, God, I was younger than you. And yeah, it's interesting.
What did you find most challenging about that whole situation?
Not fitting in, never fitting in, just never, ever, ever. I think it's really hard for people who are white and British to understand what it's like to never belong. Never belong, and especially when I look at the Nationality and Borders Bill that's going through at the moment, because I'm a very political animal naturally, and I just find it so incredibly offensive that you can send someone back to their country of origin and never give them notice and take away their passports, because a British passport is apparently a privilege, not a right. So what does that do for someone like me? Because I mean, I can't go to India because I walk into an Indian freaking country and they're like, who are you? You're clearly foreign, because I don't, you can tell you're foreign. I'll go back to Africa and they're like, yeah, cutie, you're not black. You're just not black. You just aren't from here. And you're here and you're like, oh, how does that work again? So it's the never belonging. I cannot tell you honestly how incredibly painful it is to just go alongside people, knowing you never fit in, you never belong, you never have what they have. And I joke about this, you and I were talking about this, where people say, I'm going back to Leicester for Christmas. I'm like, back to where? I'm not from here. So, I don't go home because this is home, but that's where I come from. It's a very big hole that never quite fills in.
And that this is like, when you're talking about kind of your arrival in the UK, this is obviously kind of like a long time ago. Do you now feel like you're British?
You know what made me feel British was the fight against Brexit. Because I always had a British passport because I kind of was born with one, but I never truly felt like I fit in till I fought to stop Brexit going through. And I was deeply active on that. I spoke, I ran part of the committee that ran all the People's Vote marches. I was 100% involved in that. As the only brown person, actually no, there was another person, but that made me very, very British, because I was like, this is where I live, this is my country, this is my children's country, you cannot do this. And so I really embraced that concept, but properly then.
Excellent. And in terms of like your media career, because you've done lots of interviews, lots of books, lots, like, I mean, there's lots of stuff. I mean, if anyone Googles your name, I mean, do you find that it's because of why do you think that your opinion is so relevant to people? Do you think it is because of the minority thing? Do you think it's because of the healthcare thing? What do you think, or is it everything all combined?
It just makes me laugh. I'm like, I have zero clue why anyone would think my opinion was relevant on anything. It's really funny now to look back. I've been in the media sort of almost all my adult life. And it's one of those things where I think it comes from being rent a brown face originally. So I was brown, so that was easy. I was a woman, so that kind of ticks that box. I'm very direct in my opinions, and I give, I guess, good interview. Oh, I give good TV. I don't want to judge that, but I don't think there's anything special about me. I'm just more clear. I'm extremely clear. I'm clear about my motivations. I'm clear about where I come from, what I think, how I think, why I think. And I think that in some places that must be somewhat compelling viewing in a world where we just don't say anything about how we feel.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree with that. I mean, are there any specific aspects of your career where you find that being from a minority group has kind of like either benefited or has kind of like created specific challenges for you?
Oh, I mean, on every level. I mean, I did a founders funding founders tech talk to a huge number of people, like 1,000 people or something, a few weeks ago, and I was laughing about it because I was like, to this day, the fact that I am this incredibly high risk category of being a brown female means that I still only have an overdraft of £10,000 in my business. I would just like to point this out. £10,000, which I was very grateful for come pandemic land. But I can't get, you just can't get loans and you have to go outside the banking system to get this sort of stuff. So there is that I can never get past being risky because I'm brown. And I'm just like, I'm not sure what you want from me. This ain't going away. We are where we are. So that was, and I remember a girlfriend, we would laugh and compare because she's white and I'm brown. So that was always an issue. It helps because you stand out a lot. You're almost always the only brown person in the room. And so that really helps because it's really hard to kind of miss you when you're, and I have used that to very good effect, particularly when I've been in a room with a lot of interesting people. Like I've been in a room with John Major, I've been in a room with Tony Blair, and I've been in a room with all these people, and there's like 20 white men and you. And I'm the person that would go, just wanted to say, just as the minority in the room, may I point out, and I will be very, very clear, because you really do need kind of balls of steel to have these conversations, because there are places where you're just so scared and you're like, I'm going to say something incredibly stupid. You're the only woman, you're the youngest person in the room, and you're the brownest person in the room. And I have just learned to go, yeah, no, really, no, you're just thinking like a white man. And I'm really clear about it. So I think that takes a lot of bravery, and I really like that recognized, because inside me, I'm like sweating and dying. And outside, I'm like, no. So, that helps. And so I kind of have taken it in my stride. I'm kind of like, you know what, I'm here. The worst place is that I have mixed kids and they're all kind of blonde and blue-eyed and things, because who can tell how they come out, and that way you just were like, are you the nanny? You look a bit expensive to be the nanny, but I'm just not sure where you came from. I'm like, so those things. So it's kind of, I don't even know what to tell you. It's kind of really across. I'll say this: if you stand up, if you decide you're going to make a difference, if you decide you will not accept what there is, if you decide that change is important, relevant, and you are going to be the catalyst for that change, you are always going to get the good with the bad. And I just made that decision a very long time ago that I was going to be that person. I wanted to be that person, and I was never not going to be that person. I was like, you know what, you can hate me for being pretty, you can hate me for being brown, you can hate me for being loud, you can hate me for everything, and really that's none of my business. What you think of me is none of my business. What I think of me is how I feel, and what is my only business. And it has informed every step of everything I've ever done.
That's such good advice. I don't want to make the whole interview about this, but I do want to come back to that banking thing, because that's I was not aware of that. That's pretty outrageous, right? Is this something that's been
it's standard
fed back or standard?
I mean, who do you want me to feed it back to? The guys who won't give me more than a 10 grand overdraft. The only time we managed to get a bigger overdraft, a loan, we got a loan for 25 grand when we first set up the business to build a kitchen. And it's because the lady who was our banker was black. Lovely. And then we made too much money and we left her sphere. We had to move to a higher, and never since then, we have tried and tried and tried and tried it. And then I gave up. Now I just don't even bother. I literally don't even bother, because somebody can always come up with some reason, and I'm just like, yeah, it is. And then I'll compare notes with my other entrepreneurs at the same place. And there is literally no comparison. There's no comparison. Wow. And you just, and so this talk I did, it was all about how it's really hard to get funded and get loans and get money when you're not white. And it is impossible.
Wow, that's really saddening. We actually do work with an investment company who specialize just in investment into minority groups. So I'm going to connect you with them after this call.
You should totally do that. That would be entertaining.
I will. I will definitely do that. So one thing from kind of like running this interview series so far is that there seems to be kind of like lots of minority representation within entrepreneurs, but there doesn't seem to be lots of minority representation within larger corporates, FTSE businesses, that kind of side of things. Why do you think that? Why do you think that is?
Because you work with and hire and help and support people who are like you. You know, so the establishments that looks outside, looks at other establishment, hires them, and that's what happens, and works with them, and that's what happens. That's why there are so few women as well. There are two things I think to this. One, and I say this as a person who coaches I coach a lot of CEOs who are in public listed companies, right? I am their coach. And primarily they're female, but I help them with getting listed. I help them with all kinds of stuff. And it's really interesting to see how this thing works. But being an entrepreneur for me meant that I could choose what I wanted to do, when I wanted to do it, and how I wanted to do it. And I would give up the stability of a so-called paycheck in order for me to have the control over my life, the agency to decide what my life was going to look and sound and be like, without having to explain and just constantly hit a barrier. And so instead of hitting the barrier, you're like, look, I'll just do this myself. And I know people say that I'm an entrepreneur because my father was an entrepreneur, but I'm also an entrepreneur because this is so much easier for me to be who I am than to go there and behave how you want me to behave. And that doesn't help us in any way. So the pandemic, I think, although it's been incredibly hard on women, should be much, much better for diversity, because people are going to be forced to employ us because, we got rid of all the other guys.
Wow. And in terms of kind of like making that change, I mean, what do you think the best way of doing it? Because people have very mixed views on things like quotas, for example. What do you think the best way of making these changes are? What are you advising the people that you mentor?
I stood for parliament in this country a very long time ago, and I was the first sort of brown woman to ever do that. And during that period of time, Tony Blair was introducing quotas. And what was really interesting was that although the policy line was quotas are bad, they were good. What Tony Blair did to the House of Commons with Blair's babes, which is just an offensive term, those quotas, I don't love Tony Blair in any capacity. They worked like Billio. Put the quotas, just phone me, I'll quote it. I'm happy for you to quote the crap out of me, because like, why would you? I'd get put on somewhere because I'm brown. What is the difference with that and a quota? Do it. Because what it does is it smashes a wall which otherwise will not be pushed down. If I have to take some shtick from, oh, you're here because of a quota, get over it, I don't care. I really don't. Do it. Put quotas everywhere, because that is the only way that diversity happens. Because, honestly, it's just, I remember when I was growing up, they'd say they just aren't, the brown people just aren't there that, that we can pick. The women just aren't there, there just aren't enough of them. Oh yeah, now what's your excuse?
Wow. And have you seen, I mean, in terms of like people's diversity policies, what else have you seen other than quotas that's really kind of like tried to produce a positive, inclusive working environment? What have you seen that works well?
I'm trying to think. If it worked well, it would mean a different place, wouldn't it? So I don't know. I mean, I guess you know better than I do. With me, when I'm coaching and people come and go, how do we do things with diversity? I'm always saying that the people that you hire to do the hiring, that's the place that it has to start. Everything else is irrelevant. But if the person who's doing the hiring doesn't understand clearly what you're trying to achieve, you will never get that. Absolutely. Because they have to we just go like for like, don't we? So you have to have that person. It's like, it's so interesting when you look at places like Soho Farmhouse and all these major clubs and places, they're now putting ethnic minorities at head of membership, which is just so freaking expired, because they will then look at you and not see a brown person. They'll look at you and think, oh, wouldn't you be interesting? So you don't have to go over that barrier first.
Yeah. Yeah,
nothing will change till the person who's doing the hiring is different. Nothing will change.
Yeah, 100%. I guess kind of like on the same kind of level as kind of like you can't see it, you can't be it. Who inspires you, or who do you kind of like see within kind of like, within the people that you look up to that you think other people should kind of be paying attention to?
I'm going to answer this in two ways. One, that's a really cute idea. What inspires me is poverty. I would just like to point that out there, because actually what inspires me is the fact that I need to feed my children, I need to clothe my children, I need to educate my children. Poverty inspires the heck out of me. I need to make money or we don't live. That comes to a bottom line. Now that's where I start from. After that, there's a luxury of, oh, who inspires me? That's so cute. Yes, I mean, I think that my parents are very inspiring because they fought massive odds to get to where they're going. And outside of that, you know, I obviously don't like this question very much, do I? There are, because I'm kind of like, I'm inspired by not failing. I think that any woman, people, yes, but any woman, any mother, I've been a single parent as well most of my adult life, any woman who has gone through these things and really succeeded and done incredibly well, I'm just like, wow, you know, I think that's amazing. But to me, these are not like, oh, these really famous people. These are people and women I see every single day in my life. So I struggle a little bit. I'm not kind of like, oh yeah, you look really amazing, let me be like you. And it means nothing. I don't see it like that. I see the everyday thing. You're inspiring. Look what you're doing, right? To me, it's the everyday people that get past the everyday crap, that try and do their stuff, that are trying to do it better, and every day still find something to smile about, laugh about, joke about. That's inspiring.
That's a really good answer. Thanks, like you said. I'll mark that question down as a maybe for kind of like future interview sessions, I think.
I just have a very different view on it. So, I mean, maybe other people, you know, think differently. I mean, they must think.
I think it's more so kind of like, especially with the pandemic from the last kind of like 2 years, I think a lot of people have been looking for inspiration or looking for leadership or looking for kind of like, you know, where can I kind of get that from? And sometimes like, you know, there's groups or there's blogs or there's mentoring or kind of like things like that people kind of like really pick up and they kind of like, you know, get a lot from. But I think that poverty is the ultimate inspiration.
And why do we never say that?
Yeah, it's when you put it like that, it makes absolute sense. It's incredible. Looking back over your kind of career in terms of like, you know, things that you would go back and change, things that you would do differently, walls that you would stop yourself running into, is there anything specific that you would want to change?
I'd probably swear a lot less, but maybe not. I tell you, it's really interesting because when I set up my business, I set it up to pay bills. And if I had wanted to scale, it would have been a different approach to it. And so there are some parts of that I regret, because like we were in every single supermarket in 2012 with the first cold pressed juices. You know, I invented them, created them, put them into supermarkets, and we were the first. And I look at that, and then we hit Brexit and we hit like, you know, the pound dropped and I closed it down overnight. That's literally the only thing I regret. I wish I had sort of gone, here, somebody buy this. I mean, it was not possible because we were losing money hand over hundreds of thousands of pounds so fast. But that was a really good idea. But then other people copied it, so it doesn't really matter. That's why we have pressed juices and Pret and wherever. So I'm like, okay, well, I made that difference. That's okay. I can enjoy that. I don't, you know, I am who I am. I don't know that I have anything that I would regret. I did the best I could. My choice was always that I wanted the kids to be safe. I wish maybe I had more of a life along the way, kind of, maybe. But even that I don't regret, because I suppose I could have chosen it if I wanted to, but I had different priorities. My priorities were that I wanted to spend time with the kids, that I wanted them to feel safe. In a way, I didn't feel safe when I came here, because I came here and I felt unsafe. I felt scared. I mean, you can hear it in my voice. It still brings up a sense of tears. It was so hard to be alone. And I consciously chose things that would make my children not feel that. I lived in the same part, and I stayed there always, so that my children, I missed walking down the street and seeing people I'd gone to school with who knew me from way back when. You know, I missed that. So I made sure my kids grew up in a place where they could walk down the street and somebody went to school with it when they were 4 years old. They met them, you know, and I wanted them to have that sense of continuity. I wanted them to belong somewhere in a way that I had not felt. And that I succeeded at that. So I don't know. It is what it is, you know. What
And
difference does it make?
two kind of final questions, because that brings up something quite interesting. But in terms of like the individuals, like in management positions, in positions of power, who perhaps are trying to make changes, who are trying to bring people in. I mean, they might come across versions of your younger self who were kind of like, feeling all of those things, but didn't know how to do them. How would you, because I think a lot of people don't want to pick these up with people because they think it might be confrontational, they don't want to say the wrong thing, they don't want to kind of like address things, they're maybe not as direct, and they don't also understand a lot of what's going on. What path what would you advise that these people do if they do want to reach out, if they do want to communicate, if they do want to make people feel more included
Yeah, I
in
know.
their
And
organization?
it's such a good thing to ask. It's such a great question. And it's so, important, Christian, because it's like with coaching CEOs, it's about developing teams. It's about developing teams where people belong. It's about creating that cohesion. It's about helping senior management feel appreciated. Because some of the people that I work with, they'll be like, yeah, but I don't know what to, I don't feel appreciated. And I'm like, well, if you don't feel appreciated, your senior management is also not feeling appreciated. So how do you create, I call it circles of appreciation, and that's what I teach. And then they find their own words and they go and apply them in their own ways. But these circles of appreciation create a sense of belonging. Because a place where you admire me and I admire you, and we are both having the same goal and achievement, that is something that is such a massive, massive thing of bringing people into a fold. Because then who and what we are is has a togetherness, which is much, much more than what color I am. And so these team building things where you go and climb over fire and get drunk, I'm like, yeah, okay, but that's so, it just annoys me because it's so misnamed somehow. It's the wrong way of approaching it. But if you can never pay someone enough to stay, but you can love them enough that they'll stay. You can appreciate them enough that they won't leave. And you can make them feel belonging enough that they will give you 100% of their loyalty and not leave. That's what you want to do as a CEO, as a manager. You want to make sure that you're creating that environment where I don't want to leave my friends. I work with you. And I never think that, oh, my business is my baby. It's not. I have freaking babies. They're really loud. Thank you very much. My business is not my baby. But it's really important that I'm always telling my senior managers, you leave, I'm coming with you. I'm literally coming with you. They own jewelry from Tiffany's and I don't own any, because I care more that they understand how deeply I appreciate them than anything else, because I'm never going to be able to pay more than the big guy right down, well, nowadays maybe, than the big guy down the road. But you will never feel more appreciated than when you're working for me in that role.
That's amazing. Really good answer. I guess just conversely, and just for kind of like the final question, like, if there was kind of like somebody that was out there who's kind of like watching this, who kind of like, is maybe from a minority group, is feeling undervalued, underappreciated, that kind of side of things, what advice would you give them? What would you kind of say that person should go and do in order to develop themselves in their career, kind of like moving forward?
Other than hiring me, what you should do is understand that we spend a lot of time on our external world. We spend a lot of time thinking, oh, that's my this, and here's my that, and my home, and my job, and my car, and my friends, and my I don't know what. But which is where that conversation comes from of who inspires you, right? It's very external facing. Ultimately, the thing that you need to care about more than anything in the world, the thing I spend more time on than anything in the world, the thing I spend more money on than anything in the world, is who you are inside. And that means your body and it means your mind. If you can feel physically strong and emotionally strong, you kind of feel mentally much more put together, and that sense of self-control and self-awareness and self-power is what gives you the ability to move through life. I am literally no different from any other person. The thing that makes me stand out is I have a strong sense of my own power, a strong sense of my own being. And that's quite hard to forget and hard to miss, but it's because that's what I care about more than anything in the world. So if you feel left out, if you feel marginalized, if you feel alone, the only thing you ever need to do is to work on yourself. Because if you can work on who you are and how you feel inside you, your entire external world will change. It literally will change.
That's amazing. Geeta, I really enjoyed the conversation with you today.
Thank you
you
so
so
much
much for taking part. And I hope lots of people take inspiration from your story. I know I certainly do. I think it's incredible. Thank you.
Thank you very much for having me.